Let's give everybody, if you could do the 30-second pitch on what is your game.
Okay. It's a game for 1 to 3 players. Essentially, build a city similar to Suburbia, except it's shared with your opponents. And it's got magic, so you can manipulate the city and get really passive aggressive about scoring huge endgame bonuses for yourself and getting in the way of other people doing the same.
Stick 30-second version of that. Um,
Great.
what? So the first question is, and I it's a little sarcasm. So just take it with the humor.
That's
But
okay. We're talking about a game involving goblins, so sarcasm is perfectly in order.
what game was so bad that it made you say, "I can do better than this"? You don't have to
Monopoly.
name an actual. Oh
No.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
a safe
Go
answer,
ahead.
right?
Go ahead and dump on them. Yeah. Oh,
I mean, in all seriousness, if I wouldn't get sued, I do have ideas for improving Monopoly. I think it could actually be a really fun engine builder, but it's not. So,
okay. I'm gonna reveal a little too much. I failed at a Kickstarter launch
uh,
in the beginning of the pandemic, where I took a bunch of the games that you would find in your. I made this about me. It's supposed to be an interview, but so I'll be real quick. I took a bunch of those junk games that's in everybody's closet: Candyland, Monopoly, Trouble, and I created entirely new rule sets. And I turned Monopoly into a scavenger hunt game
okay,
where you would
that sounds
gamble,
interesting.
and so you had to try and collect certain sets, but you had mission cards. So everybody got points for collecting sets, but there were additional goals. And then I turned Candyland into a drinking game. This is really the only thing.
Okay.
It's really all you can do with that. I mean, man, I did not remember Candyland, and then I got it for my kid because it's like my kid was 3. I'm like, we got to get this started. That is, oh, sorry, what is it, Hasbro now? That is a trash game. I mean, you just draw a card and you go there. Like, yeah, there's no strategy whatsoever. It's just you just keep drawing a card to see where you go. You could literally play that game without the board. You could just
That's
play the
probably true.
cards.
There's a lot of games that can be played without the board. It would just bring the price down for everybody
Oh, really? Do
and
you
take
have
up less space on our shelves too.
you have a
You know?
one in mind that you like off the top of
No,
your
I
head?
mean, okay. So my game Tompton, it's on the back. That was licensed a few years ago. Um, And with the way prices have gone up on everything, even supplies for making games, if the current publisher ends up not doing anything with it and it reverts to me, when I publish it, it probably won't have a board to reduce price, which makes the setup a little bit more thinky. But honestly, it's not worth the cost of a board. So it's going to be just as fun of a game once people learn, and it'll just cost comparable to what it would have cost a couple of years ago.
That actually brings us, kind of jumps us ahead a little bit, but that leads greatly into one of the questions here. You elected to go entirely digital delivery with your Kickstarter.
Or Cartref for
Yeah,
this
for Cartref.
Kickstarter. Yeah.
So, walk us through that. What was the decision process, and why did you choose that manner?
So there's two things going on. One is there was a game a couple of years ago called Bah Humbug from a company called Small Furry Games. They did a print and play, and it was a very successful print and play. Raised well over $1,000, maybe even a couple thousand, more than enough to pay for art and graphic design. And that in turn generated some market awareness, which I'm sure we'll come back to. It's the biggest challenge for a small publisher. Um, so that when they did the physical Kickstarter this past Christmas, I mean, they just hit it out of the park. It was an outstanding Kickstarter for such a small company. And so I learned from that. I learned that print and plays are more than a product in themselves to satisfy a certain market segment's interests, but they're also a tool for helping people become aware of a game and break through that big barrier of market awareness. And then the second thing that's going on is that especially in 2023, I'm really sensitive to people's concerns about spending money that they shouldn't have to. And so for the physical edition of the game, what I would like to do is, instead of a Kickstarter where you add more and more stuff as you reach stretch goals, instead tap into the reduced cost from the efficiency of making one big order and bring the price down. And so the way that that happens is through the game crafter. They have what they call a crowd sale. I've never used it before, so I'm going to use it for Cartref physical version. And as more people jump onto that later in 2023, I'm thinking maybe late July, probably started in the last week of July, roughly. More people jump onto that, then everybody gets a better price. So we can save people money rather than filling the box with more and more stuff. So that's a big part of why I separated the two, partly due to marketing interests and partly, well, maybe advertising is more accurate, partly due to the desire to advertise the game, but then partly also due to the desire to save people money on the physical edition rather than just give them more stuff.
So give me a rundown on this game crafter that you were...
Okay, so the game crafter is one of about 4 to 6 companies in the United States which will print a copy of the game when you order it. Actually, they won't print it when you order it. They'll print it about a month after you order it because there's a huge queue. I ordered a prototype recently. I think I'm 1,200 or so in the queue. And so I placed an order this morning. It'll be printed on approximately July 7th and then shipped to me.
Is this sort
And
of like
so they
drive-through
don't
RPG?
waste a whole bunch of stuff on inventory.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is sort of like drive-through RPG in that sense?
Yeah, and that's another company that does this. Although drive-through RPG doesn't have quite the range of different things that they can make. So they tend to specialize in cards. And I think they may be able to do certain kinds of rules and boxes. So drive-through RPG actually is partnered with or maybe it's the same company. They can publish books and they also can publish cards. And they probably can publish other different things. Game Crafter, in contrast, not only has those things, but it also has things like custom game boards, boxes, and they have a very large collection, a very large inventory of physical bits, like wooden tokens and what have you, and dice. They have little 3D printouts of various things that you can just order and put into your games. So it's definitely more expensive for just cards. But if you're trying to make a game, the Game Crafter is probably one of the best places to do it. And they offer this crowd sale option where lots of people can order a copy of the game, and then they'll just set up their machines for a day or two, and they'll make a whole bunch of copies of the game and ship it out to everybody. And so because you're setting up a lot of copies all at once, there's less setup costs, so Game Crafter can afford to reduce the price for everybody.
Okay, I mean that ties really well into a crowdfunding campaign because you're building that large group.
Right.
Do they ship to you and you have to handle individual shipping in that scenario?
No, so that's one of the nice things about bulk orders. I hand them a list of addresses and a whole bunch of money, and then they ship it out to everybody. So that's actually what I did in 2022. I did a Kickstarter for a little game called Nomadic Gardeners, and I collected all the money through Kickstarter, and then I handed it to the Game Crafter, and then they did, all their stuff for shipping out copies of the game. With a crowd sale, we just get rid of Kickstarter entirely, and people go directly to the Game Crafter. So that further reduces prices by 10% because Kickstarter doesn't get a cut.
Okay, so, wow, that's really, really. I'm sorry, stumbling. I was unaware of Game Crafter. When I looked into this, the only thing I was ever able to find that was amenable was Panda up in Canada. But
the Panda requires a minimum order of at least maybe $1,500 or $2,000,
right,
or 2,000 copies, and Game Crafter doesn't have a minimum. I don't mean for this to be an advertisement for Game Crafter, by the way. The per unit cost at Game Crafter is really high. Okay. So a copy of Cartref is going to cost in the 30s, somewhere between $30 to $40, depending on the final components. And if I had made it, just hire somebody in China to make it, then it would be probably 1/5 or less of that price.
Okay.
But the problem there's tons of problems with ordering from China. One is that I've never had a game of my own that's sold 500 copies, except for the one that I did through Stonemaier. So, like, how am I going to sell 500 copies? I don't know. And I just don't want to jump into that quite yet. We'll get to that, but my company hasn't grown to the point where I want to do that. So if I don't want to have 500 copies of a game sitting here in my office, then and figuring out how am I going to unload it, then it's smart not to print them in the first place.
I mean, that makes sense. Speaking of that, that's another topic we wanted to cover. What is your typical method for getting groundswell? How do you beat the grasses to rustle up interest in your games? What's your typical method?
Yeah, this is the hardest problem of all for small designers, small publishers, is generating awareness and interest. And the best method for growth always in every domain has always been word of mouth, because there's actually a couple barriers. One is just awareness, and then the other is trust. And word of mouth accomplishes both. It shares the word with other people, and then they're hearing it from somebody who apparently thought it was good enough to comment on it. So that's a form of social proof that enhances people's trust that this game is actually worth their attention. That's a huge problem in an industry where almost, I think, somewhere between 5 and 10,000 games come out every year, and and people have lots of options of how to spend their money. So you need to have awareness as well as trust. That said, if you only have 100 customers, then that's only 100 people who are speaking on your behalf. And it can grow exponentially because everybody who likes the game goes and tells everybody else. But it still takes a while to get started because you're starting from zero, well, one, yourself.
I read Stegmeier's book on crowdfunding.
Kickstarter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the in the chapter on building an audience, he can do it because he has the personality. He is just so friendly and approachable. But he says, you need to be out there, being really nice, get into the forums, talk about things, engage with other people about their things. And I was looking at that. I'm like, that sounds like a multi-year process to become a part of all of these groups before you can kind of slide in. Hey, by the way, I make a game. That have you considered instead of the word of mouth? Have you ever thought of advertising in any sense? Like putting up something on Board Game Geek.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think I'm really. So there's a few things going on. One is that I know of several people who have tried to pay for advertising, and it seems extremely hit or miss. And a big part of it is because the cost per click is something like, I mean, it really varies a lot, but it can be more than $1 to acquire a customer. Sometimes it can be as much as several dollars. And at the volumes that I'm selling at, the margin is only a couple dollars. So it would essentially destroy the profit of publishing a game and turn this into a hobby, which I absolutely don't want. So then you could say, well, what if the advertising allows you to scale to the point where you get better margins and you can afford the advertising? But I actually don't know many small publishers who succeeded in that. They may hit it out of the park with 1 or 2 Kickstarters, but the vast majority of them don't have continued success. And at that scale. The stories of Jamie Stegmaier are small enough that they stand out, and in many cases are the exception that proves the rule. Jamie also, Jamie took the route of spending about half of his time, maybe more, on marketing. He spends a lot of time on marketing, and be clear, marketing isn't just advertising. Marketing is everything that goes into designing a game that the public will want. That includes understanding people's desires and needs, and then carrying that product through in a way that generates enthusiasm for the product long before you ever ask somebody for money. That's selling. It's kind of like the end point of the whole marketing process. Jamie invests a huge amount of his time in marketing, and he can do that because he's hired a whole bunch of people to help him, whether contractor employees like artists or his graphic designer, or people who work to handle fulfillment and customer relations and things. And I just don't want to be a boss. I don't want to hire a lot of people. I've supervised people in the past when I was at the university as a professor, and It's just kind of, it's not really who I want to be. I want to be a creator. And because of that, I spend a lot of my time on things that Jamie can hire someone else for. I spend proportionately less time on things like going on forums and talking with people about how they received other games, or promoting. Like Jamie does an hourly, a weekly Facebook live session on Wednesday mornings that runs about an hour, and he does all these videos and stuff. So, like he puts a lot of time into this that I really don't do. And because of that, his company has a faster growth constant than mine. So if both are on an exponential path, mine has a longer time constant to get to double. He'll double faster, and I'm okay with that because I don't have other mouths to feed.
Fair
So
enough.
that's kind of the analysis, and it has a lot to do with differences in our personality. Jamie just really enjoys doing that stuff, and it's not really the person I want to be. No judgment intended. It's just different strokes for different folks.
Sure. So, do you see your company as being autonomous for the extended future, or do you plan to? Is there some interest in becoming part of a larger entity?
No, I don't want to get acquired. And so I also don't want to depend on publishers for my success. Although I have nothing against publishers, it's just a good rule of thumb that I learned early on is that most publishers ignore most designers most of the time. And there's a good reason for that. Every time a publisher puts out a call for submissions, they get deluged with this huge stack of submissions, of which, they might pick one. And a lot of them, the publisher is not going to have any interest in. So a lot of publishers literally don't accept submissions anymore. You go to their website and try to find the spot where you can upload a submission, and it just says, we no longer accept submissions. Please don't send them. If you do, they will not be returned. It's just like a really cold, hard shut door because they just don't want to deal with that.
Sure,
And that leaves
they don't want to risk
society
getting sued for something they make
Exactly.
looking exactly like someone else's,
Exactly.
even if it was unintentional. Yeah,
So I learned early on you
threat.
cannot depend on publishers. That said, it's been wonderful to work with publishers who are open for it. I was super excited to license Tompton. Obviously, I was just beside myself with enthusiasm about working with Stonemaier, and I also work with a publisher in London called R&C. So I've absolutely nothing against publishers, but I recognize that I need to be able to put food in my own mouth and not constantly be depending on publishers to mama bird food into my mouth for me. And that's a big part of why I've taken time to learn how to do art and graphic design and 3D modeling. I'm not necessarily proficient at all of these things. It's a learning process, but it has to be good enough that the customers are really happy.
Absolutely. So, do you see crowdfunding as the future path for you, or at least in the near future? Or is there a point at which you think you're just going to go directly to retail with things?
Crowdfunding is definitely going to be a big part of it for the time being. I would guess probably another 2 years or so. And thereafter, kind of in the tail end of that, I'm hoping that I'll be able to have retailers purchase either through the crowdfunding or by becoming aware of the project through crowdfunding, and then order, a carton of copies or something like that at a special rate. And then thereafter, hopefully I'll have, if that goes well, I'll have relationships with retailers who find that my games sell really well, and, they'll keep wanting to come back for more. Okay. I won't have to depend on crowdfunding. That's kind of the route Jamie took. So Jamie Stegmaier at Stonemaier, he sells directly to retailers now, basically right. Cutting out the distributor for non-trivial but not majority of his sales. You can, if you're a retailer, you can go to Stonemaier and sign up and get good deals on the games, and then you're going to have a really good deal. You're going to have the games delivered directly to you from Stonemaier, and nobody's going to be spending money on these distributors who are, I've spoken like publishers as if they're gatekeepers, but publishers will say, well, the distributors are gatekeepers, So,
right. We're all going to pass the buck. Is that a model you'd like to follow then? You think that the Stonemaier methodology is viable?
Yeah, I would like to adopt some aspects of that. I would like to be able to sell directly to retailers. I don't imagine any distributor will ever want to waste their time on me. So,
Okay.
I mean, realistically, I'll at most I'm only going to sell, I would guess, 10,000 units a year. Like thinking a long ways out. I'm nowhere close to that right now, but thinking 5 or 10 years from now, and like distributors don't care about 10,000 units. They want to be able to move, tens of thousands of units.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the margins, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about the? It's a little off topic, but in this zone, how do you feel about these online uh, retailers that leverage their economy of scale to undercut the friendly locals?
So I don't necessarily have a problem with it as long as people are clear that they don't provide the same quality of service in some dimensions as the friendly local game stores. Especially in larger cities that have the critical mass to support these friendly local stores, I hope they never go away. You know, there's probably some small towns out there like population 262 that don't need a friendly local game store.
Right.
But I'd hate to see them go away from the tapestry of life. So I think they play an important role in anchoring the industry within people's awareness.
No, that's absolutely fair. So, can you walk us through your experience with the crowdfunding of this game? Like, what was your initial thought? What made you go, okay, I'm going to make this. I'm going to put it on Kickstarter. Excuse me. And then the initial steps that you have to overcome when you're
Okay.
launching a Kickstarter.
Okay. So a couple years back, I designed a game called Emblem, and I'm gradually building out that world. So I have a map on my wall of all of the different cities, and Cartref is one of them. It has goblins, and I have already done a game on gnomes and thought, well, let's swing to the other side of the spectrum and let's do goblins. So I thought about a variety of different games that could be put within that universe, including the Goblin game. And I did a survey of my newsletter subscribers who follow me for basically free play tests and coupons and occasional Amazon gift card giveaways. And I asked them which of these games excites you, and they were in favor of the game about hut traders. Now, there's no trading in this game, so it ended up being called Hut Barons, uh, the name of the guild that of goblins who owns the property. And all of that happened in 2022. So I got down to start designing it seriously in October-ish, actually, and sent it out to the first playtesters, I think the second week of November last year. And then I did another round of playtesting in December. And then beginning this year, it was just an ongoing, continuous wave of playtesting. So like constantly improving it and making it available to more and more people. So it's accumulated over 50 playtests now that I'm aware of. Other people might have playtested and never filled out the form. And then there was the contest on Board Game Geek for the two-player print and play in Q1 of this year. I think it started in February is when I started communicating about that, trying to generate awareness to a broader audience. And I have to give props to Ali Mahmoud at RNC, who suggested that I submit the game to the contest because, I had previously looked at these contests and seen fairly low engagement with them. And I thought, there's really great games in these contests. I don't really think I'm going to win it or anything. But he said, do it anyway, because he does these, and he's found that they were helpful for generating buzz. So I said, okay, we'll do it. And I've continued to do play testing as well as print testing. So with the STLs, sent it out, got people to try it out and make sure that they come out nicely on different printers. And then it won the contest. In fact, it won most of the categories. And I think that has really drawn a lot of attention to the game. A whole bunch of people, when we won that contest, like the number of people following the campaign went boom. And that was really encouraging to see. And when I saw that, then I was like, okay, this game is ready to launch. So I did all my final editing of the Kickstarter page, yada, yada, and did the how to play tutorial, which honestly, I probably should have done that before I entered the contest. I probably would have gotten even more interest if I had done the how to play video earlier on. But I wanted the how to play video to contain components that look like the final components. So it's sort of I don't know if there's one good answer. I think maybe I should make a new video. But anyway, that's what it is. Hit the launch button. Notified all my newsletter subscribers, hey, the print and play edition is live. And then now I'm mostly just dealing with marketing people spamming my inbox, offering to help me with my launch, when my launch actually happened weeks ago. I got an email today. Somebody's trying to sell launch services for my game that's been live for weeks.
Really?
Yeah, there's so many people who are trying to. You ask me, like, what do I think about buying advertising? There's so many people who contact me trying to sell marketing services. So many. And like, you know, you look at them and some of them are not even aware that the game is live already. So I think I have the same problem that publishers have when they're deluged by submissions from designers. It's like, how do I sift out the competent advertising professionals from this huge pile of spam?
You think it's largely predatory? Is that what you're saying? They just want your money and they're not going to do anything with it, or at least they're not going to be able to provide you.
They may or may not, but they certainly haven't done their homework.
Yeah, that seems. I mean, I'm struggling to understand how they could know that you're a game that they would try to provide services for, and not recognize that they found out about you through the Kickstarter that they're trying to help you start. That seems. Yeah. It seems very automated, very bot laden, is what that sounds like.
It could be. I don't know enough about how they get their leads to.
Yeah, that is wild.
I'm obviously not even qualified. I'm not a qualified lead. So why they would put me into that particular point in the funnel, I don't know.
I mean, I did cold calling when I was a kid, and it's just spamming. You know, you talk to 10,000 people. If you get 50, it's more than nothing, right? So if they can get a couple of $100.
I don't exactly know how to find reliable sources of help for advertising except through word of mouth.
Okay, so that's one of the things to consider when launching a Kickstarter campaign is how do you vet the assistance with advertising? Okay, so that's something that we'll try and focus on in the future with Funderground. Let me ask you, what was the biggest hurdle that you encountered during the course of the campaign?
I don't think I have. I mean, the campaign has gone splendidly.
Well, that's great news.
I don't think I've hit any hurdles.
Okay, so what 3 things would you tell a budding designer who's looking to put on a Kickstarter? What are the 3 most important things that they should know before they launch?
Well, first thing is, remember, marketing starts with designing a product that people really, really want. You know, that they really, really want. I do not let a game get anywhere close to a publisher or a Kickstarter until the playtesters are really happy with the game. Like they just want to keep playing it. Like I had this game Emblem a couple of years ago. I took it to Geekway to the West. And I wanted to go around, you know, I brought the game, I wanted to show it, but I wanted to go around and try a whole bunch of stuff. And the players kept on coming to me who had previously played it. And they were like, hey, we want to play the game. Hey, we want to play the game. And I'm like, okay, how about this? I will give you the game, my prototype. You guys go play however long you want, do what you want to do. And just make sure that I get the prototype back at the end of the day. Because like they were exhausting me. That's how much people should want to play your game. If that's not the level of excitement, then have some respect for yourself. Continue investing in the game. Continue to work on making it a game that people are really excited about, because you're capable of making a better game. You're capable, if you put the time into it, of eventually getting it to the point where everybody's super excited about it. And then, well, maybe not everybody. There'll always be some, you know, games that just don't fit with certain people, but you get what I'm saying. And then the second thing is, how do you do that? Playtest the heck out of it. Just playtest, playtest, playtest. And when you playtest, you don't have to listen to other people's solutions about how you should fix your game. But do pay really close attention to their feelings, especially any problems that they're encountering. Like if there's a certain part of the game that they don't think is novel, they're constantly like, oh, you know, I've seen that in this other game, in this other game, in this other game. They're not excited about the novelty of the game. That part needs to be fixed. On the other hand, if there's some part of the game that they're like super enthused about, maybe amplify the centrality of that within the game and cut the other stuff away, so that the part that people are excited about becomes the heart of the game, and really as much of the game as possible. When you've done these things, then it becomes extremely easy to get the sort of testimonials that you need for a successful Kickstarter. Either I personally favor getting quotes. I actually ask people in the feedback survey, if there was a friend and you wanted to tell the friend why they should play this game, what would you say? And then, like, I mean, I got so many quotes, I can't even put them all in the Kickstarter page. And when you have that, now you have social proof. And like I said earlier, awareness is one barrier, and then trust is another one. And that social proof will go a long way towards helping people understand why your game is good. You can pay previewers to go over your game and make a video about it. I personally have not had any success with that, but I haven't really tried extremely hard. I didn't do any previewers for Cartref. My experience with Nomadic Gardeners, because it was a small game, small margin on a small volume, I ended up just spending hundreds of dollars sending out copies to previewers, and that ate up a pretty non-trivial portion of the profit from the Kickstarter. So my guess is it's probably important if you don't have a reputation as a designer, but as you move further along, it becomes less and less important. And I figure now that I've designed for Stonemaier, and my games that are on Board Game Geek, like Fantasies and Futures that I did with Mike Young, I think is rated an 8.5 if I remember correctly.
Wow.
So like, obviously I'm not a terrible designer, so you might as well give the game a look, and if it appeals to you, then go ahead and buy it. But you don't have to trust some random previewer who was he at least received a free copy of the game, maybe even received some money for his opinion. You're probably going to trust the fact that the designer has really great ratings more than you're going to trust some random previewer who essentially was bribed to say nice things. Okay, so I think that's kind of those three levels of advice I would give. First, make a great game. Second, do it by playtesting and really taking into account the problems that people encounter. And then number three, be sure that you have plenty of social proof on your Kickstarter until you maybe get to the point where people are just super loyal fans and will buy whatever you produce regardless of what anybody else says.
I think the playtesting is a really good point. I'm sure that people looking to kickstart, there's that FOMO, like they want to get it out there, like they want to start the process, and it's like, take a breath, right? I think that's great advice. Hold on. Maybe there's take a look first, keep trying, like don't get too excited about the campaign yet. Make sure that you're making the best thing possible. Now, you mentioned, also,
you're right, you're going to get your name out there. But if you get your name out there and it's associated with crap, then people are going to associate your name with crap.
Right.
And now you've got an even bigger problem that you need to overcome on your next game.
Yeah. I mean, you're fighting the social.
Yeah. It's hard enough already. Why would you create barriers for yourself?
So you mentioned the preview system that exists, and I'm sure you've heard about the recent kerfuffle.
Yeah.
What do you think of that system overall? I mean, I get that as a smaller developer, it's not as beneficial because it's harder to get on the radar of some of the bigger names. But as you said, once you have some bona fides, it becomes easier. Mm-hmm. But do you feel that those previews, do you feel that they provide, is there a ratio of effort and money to outcome that you feel is meaningful, or do you think that that's not really something that's worthwhile?
Well, for people who don't yet have that reputation, it's probably worthwhile. But you should just realize it costs money and effort, and you need to do it early. Give people a reasonable amount of time. And even though previewers have a conflict of interest, they're not corrupt or anything in most cases. I mean, there may be examples out there, depending on who you choose to believe, who are actually corrupt. But I think in general, they're doing the best they can. And previewers also, it's hard for them to stand out. You have to realize that they have a very hard time getting more than a few dozen people to watch their videos and have some sensitivity to that. They're basically in the same situation you are, and maybe you can help each other. I guess that's that. Longer term, I think the big problem is that there's a huge number of games and people don't play games enough with different people and talk about the games, like share their games with their community, for new people to have those word of mouth recommendations about what maybe they should buy. So like there's a lot of people in the world who are maybe game curious, but they don't get invited to play, or maybe they do get invited, but they don't attend. And so they don't have those social relationships that allow them to make choices about what games to back. They may not even be aware that these games are coming out on Kickstarter. So one of the best things that we can do, every single human being who plays games, is routinely invite people who are on the periphery to come in and participate in our games so that they can then become more aware of what games are coming out, what to look for in a game, make choices for themselves about what games they want to bring into their own lives. That's how we grow the industry. I think that's on every single one of us. You can't just expect previewers to do that job for us.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that's why I'm here, right?
Right.
Trying to get people to notice. With your game, this is just my personal interest that I have with every Kickstarter. If you were to come out with an expansion or sequel, like right now, in your mind, what would be the central mechanic or theme that you would want to explore for
Cartref?
Cartref?
So yeah. I have a few. I have promised that backers at the PNP at a certain level will get all the expansions. So of course I've already had to start thinking through like, what do I really want to have involved in that commitment? And I explained in the Kickstarter page that I plan to have additional more stuff this year and then a little bit more stuff next year. But within that, it doesn't have to be all the same mechanics. I tend to save some of the more complicated stuff for later. So the game is about building a city. Each player puts out these buildings, and then there are these mandates from the guild that you're trying to achieve. They're basically objectives. And you score the objective as soon as you achieve it, and then you score it again at the end of the game. So you're racing to get these things, and then they also provide a strategic framework for how you're going to play through the remainder of the game. I think I'm going to have some mandates that have more structure to them. So they're going to be like multi-stage objectives. And I think on the building side, I'm going to have some special buildings that, like each of the cards are currently 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches, but I think some of these buildings maybe are going to be double cards or even triple cards. Special buildings like guild headquarters or something like that. And so the buildings adjacent to those, or in some manner spatially related to them, will receive certain kinds of effects, potentially playing into these new mandate cards. And then finally, I've been kicking around the idea of having other types of components to mark your properties besides the standard ownership token that says who owns what. And some of these other tokens may be like extra big buildings or kinds of components that can move around the city. Excuse me. So the city is inhabited by goblins, big folk, which are humans, and gnomes. So the gnomes actually are kind of like an oppressed underclass within Cartref. And gnomes are known for their enchanted animals. So I'm thinking I may have some enchanted animals that maybe help the gnomes. And there might be an entire subplot within the mandates about class warfare. We'll see. I don't exactly know how much of this I want to bring into the universe that all of this exists within. But the larger picture, kind of derived from that game I mentioned, Emblem, does involve a certain amount of manipulating your position within each community in order to either become, leadership role or being part of the underclass. And so I think it may play well with this game. I just need to work through exactly what I want to do with it.
I
And
love the
last
idea of
note,
big
in
cards.
preparation. Oh, sorry, go on.
So I love the idea of the larger cards to indicate bigger buildings that have more
Yeah.
import. That's a great idea.
So one of the things I did this morning is actually made some changes to the physical components in preparation for the expansions down the line, so that there would be space in the box for, like if you want to. One thing I really loved about how Jamie Stegmaier did Fantasies and Futures is he didn't have a box. He just had that envelope that's sitting on my desk behind me. So you could take all the components that came and throw them into the primary game box. It saves money and reduces waste. So that's what I want to do for Cartref. I think I'm going to make the physical box just a little bit bigger than it needs to be, so that someday when people have these, little animals or other cards and components, there's space inside the box. The box, I got a physical prototype this week, and it was just too tight, so I needed to get a bigger box. That's one thing I was working on this morning before the call.
Is there an element or in your game or room for it for there to be tenants as opposed to just owners of the buildings?
The gnomes are renters,
Okay,
basically. Yeah,
so you could have multiple groups in the bigger buildings. That's interesting.
you don't actually explicitly place the occupants. All of the occupants are occupying, but they are sort of like imaginary, and the players are members of the guild. So you already have a social stratum where the inhabitants of these buildings don't even have a representation in the game. But yeah, I could add that. I mean, it's just more bits.
Well, we love our
The
bits,
thing
don't we?
I mean, the really important thing though is it fun? So I'd have to assess in terms of physically representing inhabitation. Does it contribute to the fun of the game? And one of the chief selling points of this game is how you kind of it's a little underhanded, but it's very manipulative of how you shape the space in such a way that it's easier for you going forward and harder for your opponents. So if there's a way to do that thematically and mechanically that involves inhabitants, then maybe it's a thing to do. But
Yeah, I see it.
maybe not.
I see it in that sort of Sim City sense where you have like industrial,
Right.
commercial, and then you would have like the slums where they just send all the
Exactly.
gnomes.
Yeah.
But if you got enough of them, there could be some kind of organization that they create that gives
Right.
you something. I'm not trying to design your game. Going through it, I was like, there's so much
There is so
potential.
much.
And then with what you were saying, that this is actually a piece of a larger reality that you've already built things in. Like, I think that's incredible that there's a commonality, a through line for what you've created. I think that's fantastic. When making Cartref, was there anything that you were forced to eliminate that was kind of one of your babies or something that you really didn't want to let go, but you realized just isn't going to work?
Well, I don't get like that in terms of thinking, this is my baby or whatever, because out of every 100 ideas that I come up with, maybe 10 of them end up being in the finished game. So I'm kind of used to the idea of, and it's not hard to come up with ideas. So, that's not the issue. But yeah, there are some things that I eliminated. For example, the first prototype. Okay, so to back up, I was part of what was inspiring to design this game was my love for the game innovation, where players meld these cards and then you count the number of times that a certain icon appears on the cards that you have in your tableau. So like maybe you have a certain number of military icons or a number of factories or whatever. And I was like, that's really cool. That's really nice. Why don't we use that as the basis for an engine builder? So that as you do more of those cards, then you have more and more effects, or at least bigger effects. So then I was like, okay, yeah, but it's in a city, the city of Cartref. So I combined in my head icon counting with spatial relationships. And in particular, if you want to invoke a building in the city, the question is how many of that icon are within a certain distance or adjacent to the card that you're invoking. And I think that's I think that that probably is a realistic or I mean, games are not quite realistic. So you know what I'm trying to say? Like, I think that that's kind of like a meaningful integration of theme and mechanics. But the problem is that then you have to constantly be sitting there, and every time you want to invoke a card, you have to count how many of these icons you have adjacent, and that just gets really, really tedious. So in the end, I changed it so that you only do counting when you make an objective, and you count how many you have in the city as a whole. And then that really reduced the amount of repetitively counting things, that you just don't want to have to count things every time you invoke a card, especially within a certain region. You can't just memorize, oh, I'm currently at 7, now I'm at 8, you know.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I just streamlined the game. And instead of taking a game of 2 people to play almost an hour, that change by itself brought it down to probably 45 minutes. And then there are a few other changes. And now a 2-player game quite often ends a little over half an hour. It feels very smooth and pleasant.
Do you feel that the game is still essentially the same as when you started, or is it like a far
No.
cry?
I mean, it's not a far cry, but it's definitely a different game. And it's a better game.
Well, that's always the best way to go.
Yeah.
What we're going to get a little into Chris as a designer. What is the first thing that you designed? Like, not just like as a game, but I mean, what was the first thing that you ever did that you wanted to change something? Did you make a house rule? Did you make some alternate cards for a game? What was your first taste?
Huh. Well, I know when I was a kid, I played Axis and Allies, and I tried to make my own version of it when I was a teen.
Okay. That
Yeah,
is a
I don't
big game.
remember enough of those details. I got myself a big cardboard box, cut it up to make a game board, and then drew on it with a crayon, and
Wow.
then started cutting out components or whatever. So yeah,
Okay, so it was in you from way back. That's nice.
yeah.
What is your favorite game mechanic? Doesn't necessarily have to be one of your games.
I like tableau building. It's not technically a board game mechanic, but I think it's an aspect of a game that really appeals to me because then you got all this stuff out there. Number one, it looks pretty if it's well done. And number two, as it increases, it gives you this feeling of more and more stuff, an engine builder type of feel. And then third of all, you can see your stuff. It's not like you have this huge crowded hand that you're trying to figure out, like, well, what do I have in my hand here? But it's spread out in a way that allows you to easily interact with all your stuff. So I really
Alexander
like
looking
that
at
one.
his domain. Yeah, I like that. I agree. That is definitely something, when it's done well, that is a really fun aspect of a lot of games.
Yeah.
What what types of games, when you are aware of them coming out, what are the kind of things that excite you, that you want to see? Or if you're at the game store, like you pull something off the box, off the shelf, what's the thing that grabs you?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I don't. That's a tough question because when I go to the game store, I'm the kind of person who will stand in the A section and look to see if there's something new in the A section and then reach that box and read it and look at it and then put it back on the shelf and keep going all the way to Z.
Okay. Do you
So
find
it's
art or design grabs you first, and then when you look at because that's for me that immediately, that's
I
literally
think
the only
that's
reason
true for
Dice
almost
Forge is on my
everybody.
shelf, is because it
Yeah.
looked like the
People
Dark
have to
Crystal.
right. People have to judge based on the visual appearance before the mechanics. And I think the theme as reflected in the art is normally what gets the game onto the table. But then I think it's the mechanics who give it the staying power. Because if the game, kind of stinks, then it's never going to come back again. And so you're not going to share it with a lot of friends. And the game might have an initial spike of sales, but it's not going to have a lot of staying power.
Do you find yourself gravitating to types of games that are different from the kind you create?
No, no. I tend to gravitate toward tableau builders, and I tend to build tableau builders. Like with nomadic gardeners, I just love having all these. I mean, I'm getting another animal. With my animal out there, I got all these animals helping out my gnomes. It's just, I mean, that's just how I am. So, like when I play Wingspan, I'm like, okay, it's all about the birds. It's all about the birds. Don't bother me with eggs. We'll do that at the end game. You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, is there another game that you love getting on the table for just those reasons?
Ah, man, I love Valeria.
Okay.
So yeah, Daily Magic, because I get to put all these, all my citizens out there.
Okay, so that really is a big draw for you. That's
It
awesome.
really is.
What was your
Um,
gateway game? What was the thing that got you started?
Probably Axis and Allies, in my teens. I
Wow.
only played it once or twice, but it's so different from Sorry or Trouble or Monopoly or, all those kinds of things that I was like, oh, that's really great. But I did play a lot of Monopoly as a kid. I played a game called Stock Market when I was a kid. The first modern game that I played a lot of was Settlers of Catan. I think most of us could say
Same
something
here.
similar. That or Agricola, you know,
That's what got me back in.
maybe Carcassonne.
My only issue with Carcassonne is the tallying at the end because I'm always worried I do it wrong, and there's so much of it. That's one of my issues overall is excessive accounting at the end of the game. That just I feel like we did the game already. We already played. Why is there another 15 minutes of post
Yeah.
credit sequence in my in my
Well,
board
that's
game?
a big part of any Euro game, right? That's one of the distinctive qualities of a Euro game is that you try to minimize conflict and angst during the game and let it just be in some ways an intellectual experience. And part of how you uh, eliminate that, oh, I think I'm losing feeling, or oh, let's gang up on him feeling is by deferring the scoring until after the game.
That's
But
it's an interesting take on the psychology of it.
it does, create this end of game hassle. So the original version of Cartref also, you had a certain amount of money to start, and then you would buy buildings as you built them. You pay to build your buildings. So building every building had a cost. But then at the end of the game, it's like, okay, I have this much in property and I have this much cash. So to determine who is the wealthiest goblin, you kind of have to add them up. So then you end up and go and add back in the cost of all the buildings at the end of the game. And I realized, why do we even pay for the buildings in the first place? Just take the permit, put it down, and we'll just assume that goblins can get financing, you know. And so at the end of the game, you no longer have to add up the cost of the properties that you played. You only have to count up the amount of money that you have, and then of course score your end game bonuses, of which you'll probably have half a dozen or so. So you're not counting up 20 different things, you're counting up 6 different things. And that makes the task a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it's streamlined.
And that's what I was talking about earlier. Like, think about what is the part of your game that's special and cut away the other stuff. Like, you don't need to pay for the construction of a building just because it's thematic. If it's distracting from the game being more fun, then just, off it goes.
I agree with that. What game would you suggest to someone who's just beginning their board game journey?
I think it depends on the kinds of things they like to experience. So if there's somebody who really likes to have conflict, then I would lean more towards take that style of games. In particular, probably look at some of the two-player games where Magic the Gathering is a great two-player game or three-player game where you can have a lot of conflict and head-to-head action. So I can see why a lot of people gravitated towards Magic the Gathering as their, entree to game. If you're not somebody who likes conflict, but you're kind of like me, you like looking at pretty things or whatever. Wingspan is a really great choice too. It's
Okay.
a unoffensive theme. It's pretty to look at. There's going to be people who can teach it to you at this point. I think that's a really great game for party situations where most of the people in the room are gamers and they're fairly nice people. They're not super competitive, but
Right.
they want to help the new people come into the hobby rather than just invite them to the game so they can abuse them.
Yeah.
So
I
those are
I
some of my go-tos.
I never I was never a big fan of the direct conflict. Monopoly generally put me off of that.
Yeah.
But there wasn't cooperative very much until the past, 15 years or so. It started to. Now I have almost all cooperative games. I love them
Oh, okay.
because I also have a kid. I like to not pound on
Right.
a kid, but I don't want to throw the game for him. Have you ever backed a Kickstarter?
Oh yeah, I've backed a whole bunch of them.
What was the what was the first Kickstarter? Do you remember?
Good luck. You're gonna hear a lot of typing.
That's okay. I have a mechanical keyboard. I try not to type when I'm recording.
Yeah, it's nice and clicky.
Yes, that's what I love.
I tend to back RPG content,
Okay.
and what do I see here? Oh, there they are. Um, and 3D miniature stuff because I like looking at it. I actually don't have a 3D printer. Um,
So you just collect
I-
STL files?
yeah, just to look at them mostly. I am going to eventually get a 3D printer. So it looks like the first one was called Traders and Raiders, from Joe Magic Games, but I only backed that one for $1 just because I thought he was a really cool guy and wanted to support that.
Okay.
But I'm seeing a whole bunch of games here that I've backed. Like I backed A Game to Remember. That was 50 story and session arcs for the busy game master. And I like that one. That's a really good one.
So
So yeah.
that is sort of accessory content for like 5th edition.
Yeah. Well, no, it's designed in such a way that it can go with any platform.
Oh,
It's
nice.
stories. It's not about a particular system.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm friends with a local game store owner, and he has educated me on the secondary market of the content that isn't necessarily the actual games themselves, but all the things that surround it. And it's a deep and fascinating area of game making that I've never experienced personally. I haven't played. Last time I played a tabletop RPG was Rifts when I was like 16. A guy introduced me to that. It's fantastic, but I realized you need a really good game master to
Yeah.
really enjoy.
Bring it to life.
Yeah, and that was, when you're a young kid trying to just stay afloat, it's hard to make time to. I mean, those things go on forever sometimes. I mean, he let me be a part of a game that had been going on for like 2 years at that point. And when he told me that, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to be able to play this game every weekend for the next 3 years until you reach your conclusion. And he's like, that's okay. I designed your character that we can easily lose you.
Well, it's the sign of a very good game master who's planning for all eventualities.
Oh yeah, that's something I liked about Blood on the Clock Tower.
And how was that?
They-
I never played it.
So they that social deduction game. They have this really excellent secondary set of cast members that are designed literally to be able to drop in and leave. That can so if you have people that can't always be around, or literally if somebody comes in while you're playing, you can just introduce them midway through. It was a
Right.
brilliant concept, but just the game is really dense.
So I think a lot of mystery games do that. One of the games that I play with a certain group of friends is Murder Mysteries,
Okay.
and from University Games, I think it's called. And all of them have spare characters too.
Really? So this is
Yeah.
so that wasn't invented for Blood on the Clock Tower.
I don't think so.
No, because I've never played any of those murder mystery games of that nature. I've only tried
Okay.
one escape game, which I know is not the same thing, but that's the concept of you're trying to discern what to do. You don't know what you're doing yet.
Well, you're trying to figure out who the murderer is in these, or try to escape. And I don't know that the escape games give people's characters, but actually, no, I do take it back. There's a retailer here in my small town of Corvallis called Conundrum House. And
That's a good
they
name.
have something like escape games. They don't actually lock you in a room or anything like that, as far as I know. But in order to notionally get out or finish it, you have to solve a mystery. And I think some of their games do have characters for the people to play.
Okay.
So I think some people have been merging those concepts together.
I like it. My kid enjoys those exit games because they make some younger skewing ones.
Yeah, and it's a perfect angle for a cooperative game too, which you enjoy. I tend not to do cooperative games. except with my wife, because she won't play a competitive game against me. She can avoid it.
I
If I
understand.
had kids,
Hey,
I'm sure we'd be playing more co-ops.
you're introducing conflict of some nature to the relationship if you're playing
Yeah,
a competitive game.
that's right.
Uh, yeah, I don't. I'm part of my reason for the I like cooperative is I'm a really terrible loser. I get
Oh, okay.
I get super disappointed and frustrated. So if I can just take that off the table,
Mm.
I love the deck builder cooperative games. That's a big one for me. And my kid, basically brought him up on Hogwarts Battle,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and he, but now he always knows the exact character he's going to play, and he already has
Right.
his plan, right? And
Oh,
so it's like
well, that's good.
we're going to change this
Good to
up,
have a
buddy.
plan.
Yeah, that's one of the things. So I prefer. That's the only thing I regret about most deck builders is a lot of them. You can find a through line that you will always take, and I feel like that kind of defeats the enjoyment a little bit because I like the idea of discovering new paths. And once you find a thing that always works, if you don't do that, it's kind of like just throwing the game in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I think all games have I mean, every game has a finite number of components. So there's a finite number of paths through it. So all games have a finite replayability. The problem is if there's too much um, similarity among those paths that you find, for all practical purposes, you find yourself running out of interesting paths too soon. On the subject of co-op and competitive, there's almost every competitive game can easily be redesigned into a co-op game through a few simple tricks. So, like one simple trick is um, you both play competitively. Just don't change any rules at all. But then at the end of the game, you look at who has the lower score and associate that lower score with a good thing that both of you get to share. So, like I redesigned Patchwork, two-player game. It's competitive, but I redesigned it so it's co-op, so I could play it with my wife. So we play the game. You look at who has the lower score, and that's the number of kisses that we get.
Ah, I see. So so you're earning something extra exterior to the game itself as a.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So
So
that
you could do this with your kid. You could say, we'll play this engine builder and then look to see who has the lower score. And that's the number of dollars that we're going to take and go to the dollar store. And that's how much that's our budget to buy stuff.
that's a great idea.
It's super easy and it works with almost every game. The ones where it doesn't work is the ones that have games with a unitary or discrete victory condition. So like chess. Pretty
Right.
hard to turn chess into it using that particular trick. However, there are probably other ways, that now that I've set your mind thinking, I'm sure you
Yeah.
could come
Well,
up with
yeah.
a cooperative chess.
I'm going to take a note on that because now I'm thinking there's a couple of I do have competitive games, but now there's a couple that maybe I will put on the table to see what we can do. That's great. That's a really that's a fun little uh, tip and trick from
Yep.
Chris Scaffidi. Um, when you are looking towards your future, what do you think is going to be your next campaign?
Well, the crowd sale on GameCrafter probably will start the last, maybe second to last week of. Sorry, I keep looking this direction. There's a cat. He's hunting the squirrels. Um,
Not a problem.
Probably will be the second or last week of July. Uh, and then I don't know whether or not the publisher in London is going to want to kickstart a separate project, the next project separately from me, just to do the print and play, or if we're going to do it all together. Um, if I end up doing that one on my own, then I'll probably have a Kickstarter around October about Dark Weefolk.
Okay.
Um,
Still
yeah,
in
so
the reality that you've created.
yeah. The reason why I kind of stuck with Weefolk, I got into Weefolk early on for artistic reasons. We can go down that path if you want, but I chose it for my brand because Weefolk kind of like hyperbolize the best and worst of humanity. Like on the one hand, you have these gnomes that are all like jolly and I mean, people give me these gnome gifts, like that banner on my wall back there, because they just are so heartwarming. And on the other extreme, you've got goblins and you've got red caps. Like red caps are terrible. They kill people and they soak their hats in the blood. And so there's this
That's an interesting
huge
tidbit.
range of interesting themes in between there that teach us a little bit about ourselves. And so I think in honor of the end of the season, the darkening of the days, some people will associate it with Halloween. We're going to do a Dark Leaf Folk campaign, I think.
That's great.
It'll be 2 games. One of them is a choose your own misadventure book. I can't call it choose your own adventure because that's actually a trademark thing.
Yeah, I remember them.
Choose your own misadventure, where you're trying to get out from a crypt and you don't know how you got there. In fact, you don't even know your name. And there's this nasty tumor lesion that's growing on you, and there's all of these really bad wee folk, and you're like, what the heck? And you need to. That one is. It's not. It's not like those wonderful books that we played when we were kids, where you don't know, should I take the left path or should I take the right path? Like It's actually a game, and you're not going to win by luck. Exactly.
Okay.
It's got mechanics, including unique dice mechanics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then the other game is Dungeon Maker Deluxe, which RNC already kickstarted with print and play. So I have to deliver that one. We're hoping to deliver it by June 2nd to the print and play backers, and then the physical edition will come later when I finally get.
Wow, you have several plates spinning at once.
Yeah, but these are projects that they're basically coming near the end. The that book one called What Lies Beneath is probably the one that needs the most work. That one is about, I would say, a third done. All of the others are basically. I started them a long time ago in most cases.
Okay. And then what is your plan for the story of Cartref, this game? Will we be seeing something else of this type, dealing with the city, the tableau building, the guild? Is this going to continue on in the future? Are we going to see more of it?
Well, definitely 2 expansions.
Right. Now, will those will be sent to backers? So if you backed at a certain level, you will then get those expansions.
Get the print and play for free. Yeah.
Do you see yourself?
You paid for it. You prepaid for it, really, at a discount.
And then, I think I backed at that level where it talked about the expansions. Yeah, future Cartref expansions. Yes, I did.
Yeah, and actually, all my newsletter subscribers, for all practical purposes, get free copies of my print and play stuff anyway, because they get to playtest. So if you're a newsletter subscriber and you want to have a shot at it, then you just sign up to playtest, and then you get to have the stuff. So that's print and play, though.
Right. And, that's great, though. That's an excellent way to, build that groundswell.
Yeah.
So we're not going to see anything like a new game in the Cartref genre from you.
I believe the guild will make an appearance in some other games.
Okay.
But exactly how that will be, I haven't planned it out yet. So there's a couple areas where the guild could potentially play a role. One is just in the very specific cards of Emblem, just like flavor text type stuff.
Okay.
Then the humans in this universe are very achievement oriented, very industrial. And there's a town in the southeast where they've been basically turning wee folk into indentured servants. And it's very Oliver Twist. It's very Dickensian. In fact, I'm thinking I may even illustrate it with a kind of a steampunk twist on Oliver Twist. Kind of, they're distinct eras, but kind of blending the two and muddling together the aesthetics of 60 years to create the appearance of that game. But I think the guild might be helpful to the underclass there in terms of advancing their interests. And so there may be some mechanics around worker organization or something like that in that game. And then if there's a sequel to this, What Lies Beneath, you may find that the guild is part of the solution to this outpour. There's sort of an outbreak. I don't want to give away the plot too much, but there's an outbreak of a certain kind of nasty wee folk, the red caps, and the goblins are partly to blame. But it's not going to happen in this book, but maybe in a sequel, the guild might be a source of support for resolving it. And then finally, the humans also kind of have a colony up in the north. And I haven't really exactly worked out the motives or the economics of why and how, or the politics of why and how that's happening. But the dwarves and the Valkyries who live in that region are trying to stop the humans and reverse the damage that they're doing to the environment up there. And they may be able to get some help from the guild because the guild is kind of in that region of the world and could potentially have some small level of influence.
Okay. Well, you have a Tolkien-esque grasp on your reality here. I like that.
It is a huge world. I mean,
yeah, that's great because if you've already built it, then you can just do something in that reality as opposed to having to, boot from scratch. I love that, and I gotta say, looking forward to the choose your own misadventure. I like that.
That'd be great.
Yeah. All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much. This was
my pleasure.
Fascinating. And I'll put this up this week, and hopefully everybody should be backing Cartref. I love the visual design. The cleanliness and directness of your the cards and the information that's relayed just instantly jumped out from the top of the page, which is why I dug into it. Really like the visual style, but it's crucial that something makes sense, and it's so obvious that you put a lot of care into making this game playable. So thank you for being here,
Stonemaier, because a lot of what I've learned about graphic design, I've learned by sitting with Scythe in particular, but all of their games, every one of them, even Tapestry, and just sitting and very carefully looking, where are the lines? Where are the shadows? What are the shapes of the lines and the textures that they use in the graphic design of Stonemaier games? Because they are so clean and so easy to use in most cases. And
there's
a great
example
there. If you're going to be a self-publisher and you can't afford to do graphic design, I recommend you spend a few hours every week. Just open up a Stonemaier game and look at how things are presented. Everything from the rule book to the cards to the other parts of the components of the board or whatever, but hugely. And I also have a blog. So if you go to ferventworkshop.com, look at the blog. And I've done that work of sitting down and staring at components and noticing the rivets in the pop-outs, the frames inside. And I'm like, this is a good thing to do, right here. So if you want to have, if you want to save yourself hours of work, just go and scan what I already wrote. And you'll
That's
be
great.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea. Now we'll put a little bit more approachable.
We'll put that in that link in the description, as well as a link to Cartref. I'm happy that I backed it. I have a friend he's started backing print and play stuff, and he's found a place that he really loves that prints things on this really great cardstock for him. So
where's that?
It's somewhere north of Pittsburgh. It's actually a camera place, but because they print out photos and posters of certain types, they have a system ready, and he showed them what he was asking for, and they're like, yeah, we could do that. And it's just a little mom and pop store, but he showed me some of his printout stuff, and it felt professional, which is there's just that extra bit of love that always makes it, having something that tactile to touch to put out in the game is always fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and you had
Thank
some
you.
incredible insights. And I do believe that people looking to start a Kickstarter campaign will definitely benefit from everything you told us today.
Great. I really appreciate that. And if you ever want to do another type of a show sometime, maybe, you go to the blog and you say, wow, that's a really interesting thing. And you want to, do a video together that you can put on your channel. I would love to
Yeah,
sit down and
absolutely.
chat with you about other people's games too, because there's some really great games in the world that are worth studying and learning from.
Yeah, it's great. You can be the first friend of the channel we do recurring segments with. That'd be awesome.
I'd love to. Please stay in touch.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. And we really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.